All right, you guys, we are coming to an end of Skills Week, but one skill we definitely need to discuss is adding and subtracting fractions. First thing that I want you to make note of, you can only add and subtract fractions if they have a common denominator. That is it. That's the only way that you can add or subtract fractions, is if they have a common denominator. So let's recap adding fractions to begin with. So say this first example I have here, I have add 12 over 30 plus 11 over 30. Now remember, up here, you can only add and subtract fractions if they have a common denominator. Now in videos past, we've discussed about the denominator, or where the denominator is located. So you guys would agree that the denominator in our first fraction is a 30. And the denominator in our second fraction is also a 30. So it is in common. They are exactly the same thing. So we're good to go up here. We have a common denominator, so let's add these. Now, we didn't work hard to get our denominator. It was already given to us. So we're going to keep it exactly the same thing. You're not going to touch it. You're just going to tell me what the common denominator was. So don't dare go 30 plus 30 and make this a 60 over here. You don't touch the bottom. Keep it the same. But what you do touch is the numerator. We are actually going to add 12 and 11 together. So 12 plus 11, I hope you guys would say that that is 23. From here, you want to look and see if these, or if this fraction is in simplest form. Can you reduce it down to give an answer in lowest terms? I can't think of a number that would go into 23 and 30 to reduce it down. So I'm going to say that we're in lowest terms right now. Okay, but what if you needed to find a common denominator before you were adding or subtracting? So let's talk about how you would actually do that. So finding a common denominator. What if one denominator was a 9 and one denominator was a 15? What would we do? So take 9 and write it down, and take 15 and write it down over here. This is where knowing our multiplication table is definitely going to come in hand right here. So what we're going to do is we are going to write the multiples of both of these numbers. Multiples meaning the multiplication tables that you guys learned that I talked about is going to come in handy. This is why. Starting off here, what's 1 times 9? And you would say 9. What's 2 times 9? 18. What's 3 times 9? 27. So see, I'm going to continue writing the multiples. The next one would be 36, and then 45, 54, 63, 72, 81. I'm going to stop right there. If I have to go even further, then I will. Let's go down to 15. Let's write the multiples of 15. So 15 times 1 is 15. 15 times 2 is 30. 15 times 3 is 45. 15 times, okay, well, hang on a second, because I see something in common. I just wrote 45 here, but also 45 was in common up here with the 9. So between the 9 and the 15, I have definitely found the least common denominator. Now, there could be another number going on down here that would be in common, but you want to find the least common denominator. That would make your life so much easier, or much more simple, because it will help in the reducing of the fraction. So how to find a common denominator. Look at the denominators that you have and go ahead on a piece of scratch paper off to the side and write your multiples out and try to find something that actually matches. Okay, so let's go with our first example here. Add the following fractions: 5/8 and 7/12. You knew I was going to do it. I was not going to keep it simple for us. So we are actually going to have to find a common denominator between 8 and 12. All right, so first and foremost, they do not have a common denominator. They're different, so I've got to find one. So I've got to write the multiples of 8 and also the multiples of 12. I'm going to start with 8. 8 times 1, 8. 8 times 2, 16. 8 times 3, 24. 8 times 4, 32. 8 times 5, 40. Let's pause right there for a second. Let's go down to 12. 12 times 1 is 12. 12 times 2 is 24. 12 times 3 is 36. 12, oh, hang on, I've already found it. Look, the number that matches between 8 and 12, the least common multiple, is 24. That's going to be our common denominator. So we have got to turn 5/8 into a fraction. We've got to turn 5/8 into a fraction that has a denominator of 24. That's what we want. Now, we've talked about how to find equivalent fractions, so let's utilize our knowledge right now. So making an equivalent fraction. Here we go. 8 goes into 24 3 times. We're going to take that number, multiply it by the number on top. 5 times 3 is 15. That is my new numerator. This is the equivalent fraction that's going to stand in the place of this one. So I'm going to write it down here. 15 over 24 plus. We know this other fraction is going to have a denominator of 24 as well, but it doesn't, so we have got to make that happen. So scratch paper over here. We've got to make 7/12 into an equivalent fraction that has a denominator of 24. Here we go. 12 goes into 24 how many times? 2. Take that number, multiply it to the number at the top. 2 times 7 is 14. And this is what we've got. Let's bring that on down here. So we had 14 over 24. That's going in place of our second fraction. Now we can add these together. And the reason we can add these together is because we have a common denominator. So we're going to leave the denominator alone. This time we actually worked hard to get that common denominator. But we are going to add the numerators together. 15 plus 14 is 29. And let's check. Can we reduce this down? Is there a number that will go into 29 and 24? I can't think of one. So we are in our lowest terms. And you can leave it as an improper fraction. We like improper fractions. Just make sure that it is reduced into lowest terms. All right, let's do one more example before we call it quits. Let's actually subtract the following fractions here. We've got 7/9 minus 1/6. All right, we're going to have to work again. We do not have a common denominator. Pause the video for a second, see if you can figure out what the common denominator actually is, and then press play when you think you found it. All right, I hope you came up with the common denominator being 18. I do want to point this out as well. There is another multiple that they had in common. Did you guys notice this? That it was 36. And some of you may have chosen 36, which is honestly, it's totally fine. The deal or the difference between the two, those of you who chose a larger number, you're going to end up reducing your fraction later. Those of you who've chosen the smaller number, you know, you may have to reduce it, but maybe not as much. So we're going to use the least common multiple between the two as our common denominator. So now we've got to transform both fractions. We've got to make 7/9 into a fraction that has a denominator of 18. And we also have to make 1/6 into a fraction with a denominator of 18. So let's do that. 9 goes into 18 2 times, and 2 times 7 is 14. So that is our first fraction, standing in the place of 7/9, is 14 over 18. Minus, let's find the equivalent fraction over here. 6 goes into 18 3 times. 3 times 1 is 3. There's our second equivalent fraction. 3 over 18. We are good to go now, y'all, because we have the common denominator. So let's go. Keep the common denominator. We've worked so hard for it, so keep it. So we're going to have an 18 down here. but let's actually subtract our numerator. 14 minus 3 gives us 11. Is this in the lowest terms possible? You got it. You're exactly right. Now, I want to make sure to tell you one hint, because sometimes the numbers are not easily seen. So I want to definitely give you this right here. If you are having a hard time trying to find the least common denominator, don't stress out or don't waste time. All you have to do is multiply the denominators that you have together and use that number as a common denominator. Let me show you what I'm talking about. In the example above, you can look up, we just did 7/9 minus 1/6. Now, we found the least common denominator, but let me show you. No, not working anything out, just taking both denominators here, 9 and 6, and multiplying them together. So you guys, what's 9 times 6? Yes, 54 it is. And you could use 54 for both of the denominators. Why? Well, you know that both of the numbers go into it. Doesn't 9 go into 54? Yes. Doesn't 6 go into 54? Yes. So, I mean, you're going to deal with a larger fraction after you had worked this on out. You will definitely have to reduce, but that gets the ball rolling sometimes, maybe when you're taking a timed test and you're having a hard time finding the least common denominator. You don't have to stress out. Just multiply the numbers that are there. Granted, it's going to be a large number, but it will work out at the end. All right, this goes as far as we're going to go for adding and subtracting fractions. I'll see you in class, and we'll get started on some work.